Welcome to the Not Good Podcast with your host, David Jane, presented by Sky High Media, LLC. The views and opinions of the Not Good Podcast are not necessarily that of Sky High Media, LLC.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Not Good Podcast. I'm your host, David Jane, joined by
Tim Worrell's up in the house.
All right.
What up?
Today we have special guest Joe Bryant.
Gang, gang. Just kidding.
Yes.
Hey, I'm actually very honored to be on this podcast. It's very illustrious. And to be honest, this is going to really impact my following. So that's why I'm here.
What's your following at now?
We're probably in the red zone, I'd say.
Fantastic. David, happy Taffy
Yes.
Day.
Happy Taffy. Is that today's Google holiday?
Yep. Yes, sir. May 23rd, Taffy Day.
I love it.
This is going to be such an interesting episode. Serious topic, not serious conversation.
Well, anytime Joe Bryant is on the call.
First of all, this is the first time on the call, and I'm trying to be very professional. I'm wearing pants. The audience cannot see it, but they're there.
So I've been kind of just with all our personalities, and we knew each other in college. Does like your congregation know that you're like as goofy as we've been, leading up to the recording?
So I don't know how Tim would feel, but as a pastor, you're both open and then also you have degrees of openness. So like I've got some people I can, it's like some people in the congregation are they're like, I'll wave to them on the sidewalk. Others, they'll sit on the front porch or in the front yard, and then very few make it to my bathroom. You know what I mean? So,
Sure.
but yeah, so basically no.
But
Also,
no,
yes.
you look. I've
We
been to your
joke-
church.
We joke and stuff but there's like certain lines and extents, I guess.
Look, I've been to your church. You put on the pastoral professionalism.
You have to.
And every time I come, you take me to your office and shut the door, and then you let it all loose.
First of all, you instigate it.
That's true.
Tim
You got-
put it really good a couple episodes ago, because I was like, we're talking more unfiltered about some, sometimes pretty serious topics. He said being unprofessional is the way to put it. Like sometimes you can be unprofessional. He said it can be professional all day, but it's fun to sometimes be unprofessional. And that's the kind of podcast I think we have.
That's true. That's a good way to put it.
But hey, at least all three of us have collared shirts on, so we're professional right now.
Yeah, we all have colored shirts on.
Yeah.
That's what my wife says. Colored.
Colored shirts?
She's like, hey, you should wear a colored shirt. I'm like, well, blue, red. She's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's collared,
Colored greens?
not colored.
Like you have a plate of colored greens?
I thought of the office where Michael says to Stanley, well, you don't call them collared people.
No, you just don't do that. That's unprofessional. That's what we were just talking about.
Yes.
This is your podcast. I'm not taking the lead here. I'm just over here. I'm just
No, it's actually David Jane's podcast.
Well, I'm waiting for David. David, you tell them what you want. What you really want.
I told Tim yesterday we usually start with some lighthearted questions. So we started off yesterday. I asked him what the worst thing he's ever done was. So what would you say, Jeff?
Oh gosh, probably come on this podcast. Not so far.
Yeah, worst.
The Not Good Podcast, whatever this is. What is it called again?
What are all of the regrets you have in your ministry now?
How much time do you have?
This is just an icebreaker.
Honestly,
Yeah.
let's see, worst like mistake or like regret in ministry.
You definitely don't have to answer.
I was going to say, we're about to
man.
get one from him right here, right now.
I'll just drop one. Look, no
He
one-
just got serious.
Look, no
He's
one's
like,
in my
I've been
church
waiting for
listening.
this
Look.
opportunity.
this is therapy right here, baby. No, I won't give that.
Or her name was Sally
Huh?
and Fred, and they wrote me a letter. Have you ever gotten hate mail?
Oh yeah, it's called, Pastor, can I talk to you? That's
No,
right.
like I've got a drawer over there.
Of the hate mail.
Yeah.
I normally will keep. I'll like read it and then I'll throw it away after laughing at it, rip it up, do what I got to do. But I normally don't keep the hate mail. I don't get a lot of the hate mail. It's more of like the hate comments or
Hmm.
side
Like the passive
conversations.
aggressiveness.
Oh no, just aggressive.
Straightforward.
Yeah, just
Just,
it's like,
just
hey,
straight up hate.
I thought you sucked, and I think you still suck, and I hate you, and I wish that someone else was here, and I'm going to the Pentecostal church now.
Okay. He's gotten hate
So
mail,
we were
y'all.
talking. I've not personally gotten hate mail yet, but that is something that goes on, and it's typically mail that the pastoral staff or people that get on the stage. Like one guy told me he like did a solo and then got a letter after that, and then he went
Good
to
night.
one of our pastors on staff talking about the letter, and he pulls open the drawer. And he's got all of his letters that he's gotten, and he's like, "Dude, it's just something that happens." And no one writes their name. It's never a return address.
Yeah.
I told him it's like the elderly version of leaving like a YouTube comment.
My
Yeah.
my pastor actually used to tell me like, "Hey, you're probably gonna have this happen, when you get in the ministry." And I watched him my whole life. He would get it, and then he would read it in front of the congregation and make fun of their grammar and spelling, and
Dang.
and then it would just stop. Like it's one way to cut it, whether right or wrong, I'm not sure, but I always enjoyed it
Yeah.
because I'm in the back just like, oh.
Yeah.
Dang,
Well,
that's pretty cool.
I'm pretty sure one of my hate mails were they took a Sharpie with their weak hand and misspelled my name on purpose.
Strong hand.
I'm like, whatever. We literally thought it was a kid's letter, but I was excited and then quickly reality hit fast.
Dang. So, what is one thing I kind of wanted to ease our way into the topic of the day? What is the chain of command in your church? And we can all answer. I'll go first. Um, my last church, there was a full-time senior pastor and two part-time pastors with a part-time secretary. So there were deacons, but there was like maybe three or four deacons. It was a pretty small church. Um, and they each kind of handled a thing. Like one guy was like the sound guy, one guy was the finance one. Um, so it was a little bit more lax because of the not as many people on staff. At the church I'm at now, I would say it's me and Tim have talked a little bit about this before. It's kind of it's like elder deacon. There's a 11 or 12 deacons with a chairman, and then they are the ones that like I had to have a unanimous decision by them to be hired. And the pastor kind of found me and brought me before the board, and they had to unanimously vote me in, and then that was it. But he did show deference to the congregation by allowing them to vote, but there was a brief issue where they talked about a campaign against voting me in, and pastor had to get up and address the fact that they actually didn't need a congregational vote, that he was trying to show respect to the congregation. And he told me, it was just kind of see where they're at, like what majority of the people are on board with change, and then, what percentage of them don't want it. But that's kind of the power dynamic, you could say, where it's like the pastoral staff works with the deacons who kind of oversee stuff. And Joe, I'm curious to see what it's like where you're at.
God, Jesus, Holy Spirit. No, it's like it's pretty simple at our church because every church is different, but we've got three deacons. None of them are necessarily in charge over a ministry per se. They all come from sort of blue collar, backgrounds and things. The way it works is, say there's something that I feel is, worthwhile, like getting some advice, some help on, some, just some either other perspectives. I'll go to them, talk with them about some things. But for the most part, the church, both like in the constitutional bylaws and then just in practice, is pretty much pastor gets to pastor and to lead. And so the only other staff that we have is we pay our, pianist, and we have a part-time secretary, but Other than that, there's nothing too crazy. Most things don't need a vote on, or most things could be accomplished through like just deacons and pastor talking or majority vote. Like we just, had we had to take a missionary off and found out that in order to take a missionary off, technically I only need a majority vote of the deacons and myself. Technically the mission board, but we don't have one of those. So
Mm.
Hmm.
yeah. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And in many ways, I probably have too much freedom, and so that's something in the future we want to build up not just the deacon body, but as well, potentially some more actual leadership.
Yeah. What would you say, Tim? Would you change it? I mean, would you have anything to add in terms of? I feel like you had a pretty good definition the other day when we talked.
Yeah, our church is congregational, so really the big decisions of our church, like yearly budget and staffing and pastors, membership in, membership out kind of deal, all goes back to the congregation.
Mhm.
And so there's myself and two other pastors here. So, within every group, you have to have a lead. So I'm the lead pastor, but I've got two pastors as well here. And then we have the deacons who are the the supporters, like I call them shock absorbers and unity preservers of the church. And so like our deacons all have like 12 to 15 families under them for caring. We're hoping to add some deacons on this year, and they're wise counsel for the pastors. When we are feeling like there's a direction we need to go or introduce, then the deacons are kind of if you can't get through the deacons or there's issues with the deacons, then you're probably not gonna go very far with the congregation. So they're kind of our litmus test of taking anything for the congregation.
Mhm.
But ultimately, big stuff. Like I said, congregation has the voice, and really they have the authority to boot me out too. If that ever came to a place. So we're congregational, but pastor led and deacon supported.
Yeah, Tim should have answered first. And I would have
Nice.
probably just said, yeah, what he said.
Yeah, we're pretty similar, I think.
Yeah, it's just different scale.
Yeah.
I suppose. Yeah, that's about it.
So the topic today is how do you consider others' interests? Um, so the first question I have is how does the church gather feedback from its members? And
Mm.
I guess Joe, since you're our special guest, you can answer first.
Oh
Well, let's
man.
first start with if you're not following us, you need to go ahead and take time to follow us. Hit the
Yes.
bell so you know every time we make an update. Prime time to follow for more conversations like these.
But before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Planning Center.
One day.
Oh, man.
No, go ahead,
Joe.
Joe.
You go. You got it now.
What was the question?
How does the church
Oh
gather
man.
feedback from its members?
Oh geez. To be honest, I mean, I don't know how I'm not big on systems as well. Like, hey, turn in this card, let me know what your experience is. I don't view it as like a Walmart checkout where it's like, how many stars would you rate today's service? Would you like a
Yeah.
receipt? That sort of thing. Um, you can tell where people are. Like, there's different times and temperatures of seasons and stuff, how people are going in the congregation. I think you can tell one kind of like what Timothy was talking about is, sometimes you'll hear from deacons or other leadership and things of like, hey, I'm hearing a little bit of this, or here's some stuff that's going on. You can kind of see the real struggles and kind of how things are going. To me, a lot of ways you can tell if an event or like a certain ministry or something is sort of taken off based on, I think, a long period of consistent like attendance, activity, people being actually a part of it. Like for example, we just started up Sunday school classes for the first time. The church has had multiple classes besides just like an adult class in the sanctuary. And in 3 weeks, we went from like 20 people in Sunday school to like 40 average in each week. So like, and that's been each of the past 3 weeks. So like, we praise the Lord for that. But it's one way you can be like, I had someone describe it. Feels like there's like life in the hallways, and so that's sort of the way I would kind of tell.
Hmm.
I think, David, it might be cool for us just to briefly go around and describe what a Sunday looks like in each of our churches, if you're cool with that.
Yeah. Sounds good.
You want to start,
All
Joe?
right. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess. Um, so at the church, we have Sunday school starts at 9:30. worship 10:30, and then normally an evening service at 6:30. But once a month, I send a devotion home because, to be honest, I don't want to have Sunday night service every night. So every Sunday of them, so that's just how that is. Um, but Sunday school folks normally start getting in there about 9:15. Now with the Sunday school switch up, coffee, fellowship, muffins, that sort of thing. Um, Sunday school normally ends about 10:15. Worship service. I know it's probably what you're really asking about because that's sort of what everyone thinks about Sunday morning. But
We mentioned that last episode.
ooh, I'll have to go back and listen. No, wait. I've already listened. I'm an avid follower of this podcast, and it's. But so we have order of service. I guess pretty simple. I get up. I give announcements. Read scripture. Right now we're reading through the book of Colossians, so I'll pick a passage or a paragraph of it or a few verses, make a passing comment, and we'll pray, sing a couple congregational songs, have some greeting, shaking hands, and all that stuff. Super friendly church. They love that part. And then sit down. They have a special. We have prayer, and then sort of one more song, which is normally like a more of a modern hymn or something like that, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But and then I go in and I preach, and then when that's over, then probably gonna get some Taco Bell.
How long do you typically preach?
Oh, average sermon is probably 40 to 45, somewhere there. Yeah. It just depends on what time I get up there. If I get up, I try to be mindful, but normally service is wrapping up at quarter to 12. So,
Cool. But you, David?
Yeah. So we have Sunday school at 9. And then from there we go at 10:15 we actually start. So we are usually out at 11:15. So we'll usually start with there's a group that does like a prelude for kind of 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll start with like a hymn, and then there will be, if there's special music or choir. I don't want to say anything bad about that right now. Um, that will typically go at the beginning because I want, not that
you want it done, just say it, David.
I like I like the worship service to be the worship service. So if there is any facet that I view as entertainment, that is done at the beginning.
Hmm.
Um, so then after if there's choir or special music, we do that. Then there's like an opening hymn, then there's announcements, and then there's typically two contemporary songs before the message. And then there's a time of response where I'm either playing or leading a song at the end, kind of giving people that time. And then there's a closing prayer, and then we're out usually at 11:15, which is plenty of time to make it to the 3 restaurants that people go to down the street.
Man, you guys have early services.
Yeah, well, we know it's the Lord's Day, so we like to get up and get going. We don't like to prolong what God deserves.
Well, I'm just happy and blessed to be able to worship during the holiest hour of the week. So our service begins at 11 a.m.
Oh, jeez.
And
How traditional.
I will say, just like you guys, we have Sunday school right before, but we start at 10. And but our service usually lasts hour 15 minutes. We kick it off with announcements and welcome, 2 songs. We have an element where we call it the pause and pray part of our service. So one of the pastors would get up and kind of set the tone, and really call our people to sit down, reflect, and spend a moment of prayer as well before we continue in the service. And then we'll sing 2 more songs, and I preach usually about 35 minutes each Sunday. And then we have a response time, which leads into our final conclusion song before we leave. And praise team led. We do have hymns and contemporary music in ours. So we get up about 12:15 at the latest, which we also have 3 restaurants in Radford that people cycle through. So
Radford's a big city. Let's not even pretend. You
yeah,
guys are a city.
huge city here in old Radford, Virginia.
Hillsville, Virginia. Why don't you come on by? Because that's the town. You go by it. That's it.
So kind of getting back to as far as like we intentionally had this episode because, we come from different churches and there's different styles implemented in the church. And as we kind of make our way through, so we've kind of answered the first and second question kind of went hand in hand. The second kind of part of that question was what channels are available for people in the congregation to express. In my experience, no one's going to write down a comment and like submit it. It's typically like, oh, I'm going to grab a member of the board and, talk their ear off or complain and, whatever it is, they're going to express it through a third party that then hopefully filters to the, pastoral staff who can actually do something about it.
Yep.
But is y'all's experience different than that?
1,000%. And then whoever tells me it, whether it's normally it's our secretary or something like that, it normally ends up to her either through she's overheard it or it's sort of like you said, it's made its rounds, through third parties to get to her. My response, just about 99.9% of the time, is if it matters enough to, like, if it actually matters to them, then they should come talk to me. But if they don't come talk to me, I can't do anything about it. I'm not going to go to them
Yeah.
because I heard through 3 different parties that they are upset or want this changed or want this thing suggestion or whatever it is. If it matters to you, come talk to me. Like that would help a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Help me help you.
So like when we're talking about decisions and everything like that, we've kind of answered this question with some conversation already, but is there anything you'd like to add on how decisions are typically made within like y'all's churches in particular that are going to like affect the congregation, something like that?
Well, the last 6 years we've been making those changes here at Calvary. Like it used to be if the deacons agreed on something, then the church had to agree to it. And so we've changed it to being more, we want congregational input and we want you to have a voice. So we've tried to create an atmosphere, because we are a congregational church, that if something is presented, I don't care if you're the only one that thinks differently on it, we want you to voice it. But the way you do that is we announce what's on the agenda of the business meeting. So we went from monthly business meetings to now we're annual business meetings with quarterly, what we call church family meetings, which is just we update people on the accounts and, some updates on the missionaries, and we take communion and we worship now rather than a monthly business meeting. And so like our annual one's coming up next month. So we are meeting tonight with the deacons and to finalize everything that's going to be presented as a packet to the membership at the beginning of this June. And so you have from the beginning of June to the end of June to question, to suggest, or just say something about any of the materials that are going to be presented for a vote. And kind of what we did was there were so many people in the past, and not just here, but all churches, you get the ones who are not going to write stuff down, but you also get the ones that are going to wait until they can corner you publicly in front of the whole congregation and ask you a question that they know that is going to put you in a bind. So we also, giving the information out early is getting people feel like they're part of the process. They can voice stuff. But then also if we get to the business meeting and someone says like, well, I have a question about this. My first question from the platform is, what deacon or pastor have you, like, I haven't seen this question yet. So who have you voiced this to in the last 4 weeks that we gave you? And when they say, oh, I didn't, then I'm going to say, well, we're ready for a vote today because there was no other discussion needed. So that's kind of the changes we've made here over the last 6 years, is given a voice, but there's also guardrails in that voice. Like you have to voice within this time frame because we want to preserve business meetings, because you've heard all the horror stories of business meetings. We want to preserve the unity even in our business meetings.
That's cool. I imagine you saying to that person, also, sir, please apply cold water to burned area. You can go and take care of that now.
I'll use that next time. Hopefully I don't have to use that in the meeting coming up.
That would be crazy.
It would be worse if like you go to say it and like it comes out backwards or all wrong. It's not going to make it work. Like it's going to make it worse.
I will say we had a really important meeting last year. We rewrote the Constitution here.
Is that important?
And it's very important.
Oh.
And we were doing a question and answer night. So like literally I was sitting up front. I know it. Those are intimidating, but we had people submit questions, but I also allowed them to ask them in case when they heard another question answered, they could in that meeting stand up and ask one. So one was about like if we're not doing monthly business meetings, how we're going to know the budget and all that stuff, expenditures, and we're like we're going to post the reports in a I don't even know the word yet, and I'm scared to say it like a
You can do it.
I said a promiscuous. That's the
Yeah.
wrong word, right?
No,
That's
no, no,
not
no,
it.
no, that's it. That's it. That's it.
But what's the right word?
No, no, that's good. I think.
Okay, Dave, what's the right word?
I don't know. Per- you got a
You know, like in an area that everyone knows where it's at. Come on, I don't know the word. You
Bulletin
got
board.
huh? Well,
Bulletin
yeah, a
board?
bulletin board that's going to be put in a. Pastor Ward kept using this P word, and I was like, yeah, all the. I was trying to sound, official, and I
Yeah.
turned to Pastor Ward because he's behind me on the computer, like running all the documents on the thing. I'm like, we're gonna put it in a promiscuous place, right? And Ward just looks at me like, that's not. I was like, is that the right word? And he's like, no. And then my face got all red, and
Who can we
everyone
call right
cracked up.
now that would have the answer to what you're looking for?
Y'all don't know? Okay.
Call Ward.
Yeah, just look it up.
Jeez.
Like, I don't even know what to. I don't want to Google promiscuous.
Hey guys,
No.
just want to remind you if you want to know what money we got this month, look at our promiscuous board.
Per
Per-
Spiculous.
What? Now he's just making words up. You're like one more try away from speaking in tongues at this point. Oh, jeez. I would
Anyways,
say
keep going.
I would say I like what you guys do here at Calvary as far as some of that goes. We have one annual business meeting a year, so it's at January. We give like a sort of a couple weeks notice. We don't, however, give like an agenda because normally that's made sort of throughout the fall and then finalized by myself and the secretary. I will, however, go over and give it to the deacons normally about a week in advance, that way they can look and be like, "Hey, is there anything else that I need to add?" That sort of thing. Any other details or things that you could maybe assist with that. And then the way it goes is just the past few years, the culture has changed. It's become a lot more healthy. So the questions have gotten better and more spiritually focused. And then, we have, of course, each major topic that we're going over, I sort of like will take questions, as they come up. I've only had a few times where I've had to be like, okay, we're past that. Normally
Yeah.
people kind of get the flow of things, or sometimes a question will come up and they'll say, hey, I had a question about such. I'll be like, go ahead and ask it, and then if I can't answer it now, I can always talk to you later. But it's gotten a lot better that way. And I would say very, very rarely is there like just I want to use this as an opportunity to blast everything here at the church. The people that used to do that, and there used to be a lot of that at the church in its history, left either before I got there or shortly after I got there. But yeah, it's pretty healthy. But I am gonna look into maybe, how do I get people information so that way they can maybe be more prepared or have some things a little bit, more ready to go, I guess. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And I think the big thing, like I mentioned earlier, is we define what the congregation votes on now.
Right.
Like it's very clear.
Mhm.
Like not everything gets voted on by the congregation, which it used to, but budget, committees, leadership, and membership, and membership in and out, leadership in and out. So when we started incorporating newer styles of music, just for an example, like that was not a congregational vote. That was a leadership direction.
Right.
But
Same with like change of service, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
done that. Like,
Mhm.
no need to vote on that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Like going to services for Easter. That was not a congregational vote. That was the leadership's like, we have to this year because of spacing,
Yeah.
and we just did it. So yeah, that's a good example too.
Because in some ways, like there's some things that like you said, it affects them, but it's more of a leadership decision. Like you've already done your job in voting this leadership in place to make these decisions. We don't have to then circle back and run everything that we do by you,
Yes.
which I think that's important to note.
When you vote these people into position, you entrust them to steward
Yeah.
those areas well. And so
Mm-hmm.
your vote is a trust. And that's why the annual business means a big deal now.
Right. Yeah. There's a give and take, the people and the Lord and the Bible gives us as pastors, especially, we're to steward the the people. I mean, and so I think it's good for them to trust us, but then there's also a line too where it's like, okay, we also have to, in being good stewards, invite them in so they know what's going on. Honesty is
Yeah.
pretty much a pretty good policy, and you want to
Mhm.
keep them in on things
Hmm.
that they need, and you want them to know that hey, you belong to the church. It's not just us, in leadership or whatever, or pastor and deacons making decisions and doing whatever they want. Like, this is your church. This is your body you belong to. You're a member with not just a vote but a voice, and I think that matters.
So, um, you all have both mentioned making changes. Um, have either of you experienced kind of any like trepidation or anxiety in making changes? Like you have like like it's a decision that needs to be made, but like you're legitimately worried about how people are going to receive it, or kind of have any anxiety with that.
Yeah, I remember meetings where I was physically sick walking into the room because I just like even with leadership behind me buying in, it's like now we're going to the congregation and it's like what is about to happen? Like we're about to do that with we're renovating our sanctuary and we're voting on that next month. And so I'm excited for it, but then I'm sure that those anxious thoughts are going to be coming, be ready. I'm ready for it to be done.
Yeah.
But I remember being physically sick, even going to deacons meetings at first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I pastored a small church before I ended up here in Hillsville, and they had monthly business meetings, which was pointless. And I remember after a while, just the way things had, sort of become very much filled with turmoil. It was literally the 15-minute drive to church. Me and my wife would not even talk to each other. We weren't at odds with each other, but like just the dread. And the
Yeah.
moment someone walks in the door, we would literally look at each other and go, here we go. And so I haven't had that as much here, but I'd say my first 2 years, I've been there, it'll be 3 years, July 4th. And first 2 years, it was still a lot of that. Once I got through this past business meeting, like had really changed by then. Things were a lot better, but I still sort of get that feeling about things that I'm unsure of, where I'm like, I know that I'm not sure how exactly this will be received. You sort of get that still nervous feeling, and like there's an unknown. Anytime you bring stuff to the congregation, there's always an unknown that you're like, okay, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Do you find that with like our church, I think is like close to 60 years old. So there's a lot of stuff that we kind of have come up here. I won't say we deal with it because it's kind of like, written in the code of the church almost. That like we've always done it this way. And I know every church faces that, like no matter if you're a year old or 100 years old, like we've always done it this way. So what is the best way, like as senior pastors? Like I hear our guys talk a little bit at a time, in terms of like we can't make every single change at once, but kind of do you have any more insight into this is definitely a cultural change that we need to make. It's written into the DNA of our church, but how do we fix it?
I think I don't know, and Timothy probably has some different insight because you're a lot farther along in the sort of revitalizing journey and stuff, and so I know it's a different topic for a different day, but um, I would say a lot of the cultural changes. It's something that I had to learn pretty early on. You can make some things that sort of turn the sails or the rudder that way, but ultimately it's still going to take time for it to make the turn. You're still having to worry about, well, where's the wind blowing? Is the wind going to change? Are people going to jump overboard? Are people going to cause a mutiny? Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot, there's a lot that takes place. And so for me, always with those sort of cultural changes and decisions like that get made, it's more so of like, all right, which one is most critical to the life and health of the church now and 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
What is more impactful at the core of like, how is this going to affect our families? How would this maybe affect the community? Like, is this something that needs to be fought now, or can it be fought later? Can it be dealt with? Can it be?
I'm a I'm a big stats guy, so factual data always is great insight and I don't want to say ammunition, but great support. So like there's hills to die on, there's hills not to die on. So I think if you're not, and I don't say this in cliche way, like if you're not immersed in prayer, like your selfish ambitions are gonna always come out. And it's amazing how many times, like I tell people right now, like there's our church is still not like if I was to handpick where I was going to be at and what kind of culture I would be in, like our church still wouldn't be there. Like they wouldn't fit that description. But I absolutely love this place. Like I have complete joy and like I love where I'm at. But there's hills for you to die on. But when we started making changes, I would in our business meetings because they were monthly back then. I would put graphs and stats on. Not that it's all numbers, but numbers are indicators of health. And so I'm like, so we can continue being the church you guys want to be at, which has been the last 5 years, which you see the graph with the line going downward, or we can start making these small preferenced changes that I believe will start reaching more of our area for Christ. And as soon as you put those visuals up there, like you're not just speaking, Timothy wants this, but it's a reality of like, do y'all want this church to die? Well, everyone that's been here for 100 years is going to be like, absolutely not. Because one of the criticisms is like, Pastor Joe, you can't make those changes. And then they'll follow it with, why aren't there young people here? Why aren't we reaching new people in the community? Well, it's like, well, those two things don't go hand in hand. You can't do things that you did 20 years ago and still reach
Yeah.
the generation today. So which one do you, if you had to choose, and I often ask people back in the beginning, it's like, which one do you want? Like, I'm trying. I love y'all. I'm not an ice cream guy. I wish I had a flavor for everyone, but
Sure.
we've got to move forward. And there's things that we haven't touched, and there's things that we need to touch. And prayer is going to help you guide that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, like you said, there's certain hills to die on, certain hills to live on, and learning when those battles are, I think you would probably say the same thing. Many times, especially earlier on in the process, you're like, everything is worth fighting over because you're able to see oftentimes what the people can't see. And you can see that because you've been praying before the situation, praying for the answer, receiving the answer, like getting the direction, prepping in prayer for the presentation to the people and all this stuff. And so there's a lot that goes in it, but prayer is absolutely key for leading change. If there's going to be any change in a culture of the church, it begins and ends with prayer. That it has to.
You got to talk about change a lot before you make the change or propose a change. Talk to
Mhm.
people about it privately.
Mm.
I think like one-on-one, like take people to lunch, coffee, have them in your office and start floating ideas out. There's many times where I've sat with people here at our church and I'm like, I know you don't like this.
Yeah.
So tell me what you don't like about it. And can I tell you what I love about it?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it's like, all right, then let's pray about it together. So talk about it a
Mhm.
lot, but then celebrate every victory as much as you can.
Yeah.
Because then people crave more victories.
Right. And I think finding that the biggest part of changing a culture or just being healthier as a church, it's in the little conversations, the little decisions, the little victories. We're so accustomed and so driven, I think it could be from Bible college, the things that we read, consume, just even the culture around us. We want the big thing now. We want the Pentecost. We aren't as concerned about following Pentecost and every Lord's Day after that. But
Mm.
it's every Lord's Day after that and what happens between the Lord's days that make up a greater Pentecost, if you will. At least in my perspective.
I like it.
What do I know? I'm just a guest.
So coming from kind of like a more traditional church, you would describe your church as? Like, has there been, just coming from a music person, has there been any mention of like incorporating contemporary songs at all? Or can you speak to like the decisions kind of surrounding that at your church, Joe?
Man. First of all, the label traditional, I think we need to address. No,
Please do.
we're definitely traditional, but here's the thing that I hate, honestly, about the label. If you want me to address it for a moment.
Please.
Yeah, yeah,
David,
yeah.
Are you cool with it?
Yeah, yeah.
This is really
Uh-huh.
why we have you on here.
That's
Come
fine.
on.
Look, here's the deal.
Hey, man.
Oh, geez.
Hey, man.
Gosh. All right. Yeah, that's a whole other tangent I could go on. So the whole idea of traditional, what is traditional, right? We could say, what is traditional? What is contemporary? Well, contemporary, if we look at its basic, it's whatever's happening right now. So we are traditionally contemporary. We do things in what we would consider traditional in the sense of, I mean, we're not as traditional as Timothy over here, 11 o'clock service hour, but
Right? Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
but little things
Yeah.
like that. Every church is traditional. I think we've got to get rid of the idea of thinking that traditional church means that you have bulletins and you use hymn books. Every church
Yeah.
is traditional, whether they like it or not.
Yep.
Every contemporary, new, hip church plant that has some weird name that's of the church that doesn't even have the word church in it, just like some sort of
Like
noun.
geographical names.
We are River. Welcome to River. We are so glad you're here. Step into our water. I mean, whatever. Like that's fine. Each their own. But
Yeah.
like they're traditional. They are just establishing what we would consider modern traditions, but it's still the same. And as a traditional church, the when we got there, so I got voted in 3 years ago last week. And the first couple Sundays that we went there, which only went there 2 Sundays, the second Sunday I was there, they had another round of questions, and then a question and answer with the congregation, and then the vote and all that stuff. But different story. But so one of the things that my wife and I loved is that they had already begun a few years ago incorporating some contemporary songs. So we're
Amen.
traditional. Yeah. Oh gosh. So we're traditional in the sense that
Come on.
we have a preference of typical Baptist, specifically independent Baptist hymns, and styles of music, but they're also very comfortable and with a few. We've probably got 6 or 8 that sort of stay in rotation, and it's the third song that we sing right before I go to preach, and it's anything from Getty, Sovereign Grace, Matt Papa, Boswell, City Light, different things like that that are good, solid doctrinal songs that would be considered by many contemporary, but I would consider them to be new traditional. They're
Mhm.
traditional hymns in the
Yeah.
sense of what they
Yeah.
are, and we have just a piano. But for our specials, we have a special every Sunday, and it stays on rotation of about 6 or 8 different people that sing. And we've got uh like this Sunday, my wife will sing. She'll probably either play piano and sing it or sing with a track and sing song. Um, and it varies. So it's everything from like someone will get up there with a hymn book and a guitar or a cappella and sing a hymn that's a favorite of theirs, all the way to like, you know, contemporary stuff that you'd either hear on the radio or hear it sing at a conference or what have you. Um, yeah, so it's interesting. We already walked into a place that was comfortable with it, and so haven't really had to navigate making those changes. It's more so the changes I've had to make with some of that is like, uh, what traditional, how are we going to stay traditional, but also be willing to change, like instead of singing 2 songs, 3 songs, or whatever, just things like that. But yeah, we're developing our own traditions.
That's really cool because I like the point that you made about like basically even if it's a new church, the second week you have some kind of traditional. I mean,
Exactly.
because it's an established thing. So that is that's some good insight into that. Tim, did you have anything to add?
No, I was going to bring up that same point. Some tradition's good,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
it should.
legalism's bad.
Should.
Tradition's good.
Well,
Yeah.
and the thing too, once more for myself at least, that's another label of, well, what is legalism,
Yeah.
right? Legalism in its truest biblical sense is the addition to something for salvation. So when we think about it, most people in most churches that you and I would consider legalistic technically aren't legalistic in the true sense, but we have put that label on those who are hyper traditional, if you will, hyper conservative, um, you know, whole other sort of things. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's neat.
labels are not fun. I don't think they're helpful and also harmful. It's a double-edged sword. The moment you use a label, traditional, contemporary, whatever it is, it's immediately going to give up red flag. So when I tell people I'm an independent Baptist, oh, okay, so know what that means about you? Well, do you?
Well, and we are too.
Right, exactly. But you're independent Baptist, doesn't use the King James. So, I'm not sure if we even allow you guys in our group or not.
I
No,
mean, that is the cool thing though. Like all three of, I really, I'm not too familiar with yours, David, but like me and Joe, it's like,
probably non-denom.
we're really,
Just Baptist in disguise.
We actually
Oh,
are.
so they're Baptist in disguise.
oh,
They're like, we're Baptist, but we want to be like relevant Baptist. So
We used to be United Missionary Alliance and then we pulled out of that because of an issue like 15 years ago. So now it's just
The issue
faith
was that it had
church.
3 different titles to describe what the church was. No one knew what it meant.
I know I hadn't even heard of that denomination before we came here. But I mean, now we're out of it, so it's like doesn't even matter.
Must not be a good one.
What I love about like in our area is so many people label us as too traditional, and then so many people label us too contemporary.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of that.
I think it's hilarious.
Well, I mean, down
It's a
in
good
Carroll
spot to be.
County, it's even different here. I mean, we're 40 minutes away from each other, and it's most churches, regardless of denomination, are going to be 30 people or less, or maxing out at 30 people. You know, like it's that's normal average. And we've got some independent Baptists in the area, or you know, the missionary Baptist, different variation. We even have a lot of primitive Baptists in our area too. But um,
Hmm.
the we would be sort of similar. We're too contemporary because we have our words on the screen, and you know we sing a modern song, or we allow people, you know, we don't care as much about dress, things like that. But then we got others who are like, oh, we're just, you know, doctrinal highbrow, you know, jerks over there, whatever.
Having them revivals.
Oh yeah, we have revivals. We're having fall revival late September. We'd love for you to come, Timothy.
I'll be
Don't
there.
we'll see.
One of the things when you talked about tradition, I heard a guy recently talk about like rituals and kind of how Judaism was kind of founded on these like weekly rituals, yearly things that would come up throughout the year that you would observe every year. And he had this prayer that he did with his kids. And it was just kind of like a prayer incorporating like who God was and how he provided for you. And then like at the end, it's like a Jewish kind of prayer, but and like at the end of the prayer you had honey. And so instead of like honey, he would give his kids an M&M. And he was talking about it like he was talking about it like if the kids grow up and happen to be backslidden, and he like imagined this worst case scenario, they walk into a grocery store and see M&Ms, like that ritual having been done every day or every week, to their adult life, like they would see M&Ms and like not help but think, man, like that prayer that I prayed with my dad, growing up. Obviously he hoped that his child was never like backslidden like that or got to a place in their life, but he was speaking to kind of how the good, seeing good in other religions like Judaism. Obviously they don't believe in the Messiah or the one that we believe in, and then they kind of stopped 2000 years ago. But there are things about that God ordained kind of religion relationship of established Judaism, that were good, obviously.
Well, I think people making changes in the churches need to keep that in mind too, that a lot of the people enjoy and want to stick with the hymns,
Mhm.
the pews,
Mm-hmm.
certain colors, because that
Red,
makes
by the way. That's the only one.
ours is green right now.
Oh.
So, and the reason they don't want to get rid of it is because that's what they remember when they grew the most to the Lord. And so we need to be sensitive, understanding that they're just not being like unwilling to change, but it's pretty personal to them. Like when they think
Yeah.
of church and they think of their relationship with the Lord, they think of red carpet, which we used to have here, pews, and hymns. So it looks different means it's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think people have a hard time freely and willingly entering into all the blessing that a future promised land can be because they're still focused back on what they used to have in Egypt. They forget the hard parts and the bad parts. And I think especially when you're in a church that's sort of revitalizing and things like that, they remember only the good of the last, 3 pastors or whatever, especially the last one. That's just how that goes. They only remember the good. They don't remember like, hey, well, what you don't know is they didn't set you up for future success. That's why you died. That's why you split. That's why,
Mm-hmm.
um, so, we as humans, we choose to remember normally the traditions that we hold to that were good. We try to forget the bad or overlook it or go, well, it's not as important.
So I want to kind of slide into, I had some scriptural foundations to consider other people's interests. I don't know if you mentioned this one or not, but Philippians 2:3-4. I have it in both ESV and KJV in honor of Joe Bryant.
Well, as a good
Hey, man!
independent Baptist, I brought my own King James, and Timothy is over here with his phone out. It's not even a real Bible.
Blessings. Blessings. Here it is. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. If you had no idea what I just said, let's go to the ESV. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in
Jeez.
humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only on his own interest, but also to the interest of others.
Okay.
I like that reading
now,
a whole lot better.
Yeah,
Now it
I'm
makes
sure
sense.
you do because it doesn't make you work to enjoy God's word or to actually, you don't have to think about it, you know?
Oh,
It's emotionally driven. That's what it stands for. Emotional standard version.
well,
And you guys get all your look, see that you ESV people are just like the KJV guys. Exact same thing. Oh, you see, we like to be relevant and readable, and you guys are stuck in your traditions. And then guess what? Everything in your church is ESV now, isn't it?
absolutely
Traditions.
not, absolutely not.
And for the record, I am, in the words of Dr. Bowman,
KJVP.
I not King James only, but I only use King James. But I have read others. Your reading of the ESV was fine, David.
Thank you.
Approved.
Hmm.
Approved.
That's a strong
And
word.
then
You didn't
another
get a
one we
hey
had.
man from Joe. I cannot wait to get one from him.
You're not going to get a hey man
Man.
from me, okay? I don't like John Hamblin or Phil Kidd or any of the camp meeting crowd. And if you want me to have me back on a podcast talking about those, let me know.
Please. We'll tag the recovering fundamentalist crew on here.
What's funny is I got mentioned not by name in it one time. Brian Edwards, shout out to him, pastor of Hope Church in Danville, and they he came to a funeral that I did for a church member at the when I was pastoring in Danville, and he said meets in the lobby, and I said he goes, Pastor, I want to thank you for giving the gospel, and like this was the first funeral I've gone to all week, which tells you the life of a pastor many times is going to funerals,
Oh,
even
yeah.
whether you're doing them or not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's like, this was the first one all week where I actually heard the gospel and I feel encouraged on the way out. And I said, well, and my immediate response with my brain was, well, I just didn't want to end up on the Recovering Fundamentalist podcast. And so he laughed. And then the next podcast at the beginning, they were talking about like their weekend or whatever. And he brought that up and was like, look at that.
Nice. Nice.
Give him a tag.
So yeah, we'll have to tag them. The second one is Romans 12:10, which says, I'll start with the KJV. Show family affection to one another with brotherly love. Outdo one another in showing honor. Actually, I'm not, what's funny? I'm not sure which one I'm reading because I didn't say they were KJV or whatever. But the other version that I have is be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love in honor, preferring one another. That one was KJV because honor is spelled with a U.
Which is the proper spelling. That's the King's English.
Because you are to share honor.
That's right. Savior with a U. If you don't put the U in there, well, it's not good.
So some things I wanted to just kind of discuss as we begin to wrap up. Some specific examples of how Jesus considered others' interests in his ministry. And I think that this one is a little bit easier to, come up with coming from the ultimate example of a servant.
Right. Yeah, Jesus thought of you by coming to this earth and dying in your place. I had a person when I read that verse to him, and he was really really contentious against some of the changes we were making. He said, I understand that passage, but when do I get my interest considered in this church?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, at what point did Jesus ask that question? Like, he was so ingrained in your interest, he not once thought of his. That's what I think that passage is trying to tell us.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, a leader has to be a leader. So like we make a decision, but that stumped me for a second. When do I get my interest?
Let me translate that question. When do I get what I want?
Boom.
That's the that's the King James version of that, I guess.
It went from like going to a praise team oriented service to, oh no, like we got to look at the health of our church, anyways.
Yeah.
So that's what came to mind when you
And how it says outdo one another in showing honor.
right.
And when you show, like, when you love your neighbor as yourself, that means as much as that particular person wanted his own interests, even more so, you should care about the interest of your neighbor.
Right.
I mean, that's like, it's just, I don't know, it's crazy that, like, oh, I understand that, but wait a second, when does my interest get
It's like you
heard?
asking that question tells me you're not doing it.
Well, I
Yeah.
think for me, if you look at the passage in Romans 12, it opens up. I'm going to use a King James word here because that's what I'm reading from. But I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. It's reasonable. Like it's reasonable for a Christian to be a Christian, and being a Christian goes back to Christ, and Christ was meek and lowly at heart, humble, and his entire life and very being was putting others before himself, not just earthly people, but even the glory of the Father. And what we really realize here is, at least as you look later on the passage and he deals with all those things that you just read, David, is most people who are saved and in church and are trying to serve the Lord, most of their doctrine that they know is theoretical only. It hasn't been put into practice. They know that it's like what Timothy was saying with the gentleman there of, well, I know what the passage says,
Right. I can
but
quote it.
right, and so that's the theory of it. It's like I understand the theory of what I know what the Bible says, but I don't know what it means, but actually obeying it is a different story.
And I think of the one time where it's recorded that Jesus wanted to contradict kind of the way that everything was set, was where he he then prayed to God and he was like, let this cup pass from me, and then he said, but your will be done.
Yeah.
So it's like the one time that it's recorded that he didn't want to go through it and he thought of his own interests because he was human and he knew the pain that he was about to endure. He turned and prayed, which I think is the example that we take from that. Like when we want our own interests heard, we pray about it.
Mm.
So I mean, it's
Mm.
I think what's
there's
not
not all of
helpful.
a sudden, yeah, there's not all of a sudden this like, oh well, if you really want your own interests, you go here. I mean, it's no, when you really want your own interests, you pray about it and ask why I want this so badly.
Mm.
Well, we're in such a consumeristic culture, and whether you're a Christian or not, we're consumed by consumption. Like we are constantly hungry to consume, and we want to consume what we want to consume, not whatever's laid out there. And so we forget the whole idea that sheep are herd animals. We eat where the shepherd leads us, and we eat what the flock is eating. We're not special, and we we like to think that we get to pick and choose what we want. We want everything in the church, pastors included, we're guilty of this. We want the culture to be our own personal Walmart. We want the people to be our own personal Walmart to serve
Yeah.
purposes, of what we want. No one really likes Walmart, but the ideas of Walmart is this that we all like. You can go in and you can pretty much get whatever you want. So if you want to make it a quick trip, go in, get the one thing and back out, well, you can do that. But if you want to roam around, if you want to go get more stuff, if you remember you need something else, you can go get it. And we treat all of life and especially church life that way. We think it should translate because I get what I want when I want it outside of church. Therefore, in church, I should do likewise. Whether you're the pastor, that's a danger for each one of us and the people.
Mm.
Mm.
Well, it's all, why did Jesus die for us? Because he was centered in love. Like First John says, the ultimate way to love someone is to lay down your life down for them. And then it goes right into basically saying, if you don't have the opportunity, then he who has this world's goods, give it to them. Give it to others, share with others, like love. And if we don't have love, we're nothing. We're just a sound and brass. And so when your church should be so engulfed in the love of Christ where it's outpouring in reasonable service, as Joe mentioned in Romans, which how do we get there? Well, our minds are transformed and renewed. It's maturity. It all comes down to maturity. If you are a mature believer, then you're full of love for the others. The best statement I've ever heard was from an older woman at our church who couldn't stand drums, couldn't stand the praise team, could not stand any of that.
Amen.
You got one.
You got an amen.
I knew. That's why I.
An amen.
No, I
You're not
heard
going
it.
to get the hey.
Hey man. Hey
No, you're
man.
not going to get it.
Hey man. And then a few months later, she was like, "You know what? I still don't like the music, but I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna smile during it because young people are literally getting saved and baptized in our church right now. I'm like, that is the
Yeah.
beast. She has a love for the Lord
Maturity.
and a love for others. That's a mature woman.
Yeah. Do you
I think
think?
that's neat.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, sort of a bigger question, I guess, is most of the problems that we probably discuss on podcasts and we read books about come down to the fact that most Christians aren't mature.
100%.
And so we could stop writing books and doing podcasts if each person did what they were supposed to do.
The
But
reasonable service.
and it is reasonable, but the issue is we don't treat it as that. We don't preach it as that. We don't believe it really to be reasonable because if we thought it was reasonable, well, we'd do it.
Well, I came back. I told David Jane this in the last episode. Like, Christ, the prerequisite of following him is to forsake all. And we think we're something special and spiritual by giving up an
But
hour.
the traditions.
But it's like we give them 1 hour. We give him 1 hour and we think we're good. And I would even question that hour. Are you really giving him the hour? But
Yeah.
he's called us to forsake all. That is, you die to yourself, every part of your being, your desires, and your wants, because Christ bought you with his blood. He literally purchased you back to him. I want to be where Jesus is and how he acts.
When Joe, when you mentioned how it all kind of goes back to mature Christians, I think of how like Dave Ramsey for the last 30 years has been addressing people and their finances, and it's like the same issue every time, where it goes back to like you either don't know how to budget, you want to keep up, with the Joneses, whatever you want to do to end up in your situation, you're not good, as good with money as you should be. And he's just addressing the same thing for 30 years. Like it's just now credits involved or now, whatever. I don't know. It's interesting how it all kind of boils down to a root issue of like selfishness.
And you know how people grow up, right? The only way someone can grow up is to decide they want to grow up.
Yeah, you got to take that personal responsibility. And we live in a culture now that you just do away with it. It's always someone else's fault. And this is
Yeah.
nothing new. When you look at the Garden of Eden, very first sinners, what do? They blame everybody. What happens after that? We always blame somebody else, and we always think, well, someone else will do it, or it's someone else's fault, or someone else should do it, or we all choose the route of everyone's going to be walking in the wilderness, and instead of choosing to make the wilderness, a whole lot smoother of a ride, we're just going to complain a lot.
Yep. Yeah.
It's easier to complain. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel important when I complain. Because my voice goes out there, and I'm like, this is this, and then I wish this, and it's like, okay, well, is it really accomplishing anything?
Right.
There is this it's this idea of like, and I feel like social media actually hasn't helped this, because there will be someone that they make a post on social media, and it's like they think their voice is heard. You know, I mean, and you're just like, no, you're not going to change this massive organization's like advertising campaign or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Just because you commented on their Facebook post.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
like the people that do the copy and paste stuff of like the new Facebook has now been blocked. Here's the way to do it.
yeah.
Or repost this picture of Jesus, or keep scrolling if you love Satan.
Oh yeah, that's an oldie but a goodie. But I like the one now that's going around. I've seen it. This one elderly lady at a church in Danville. I won't say her name, but she won't watch this. No one else will either. So she'll she'll be she shared like 3 straight days the same meme of Jesus holding Donald Trump in his arms with the American flag in the back.
Oh my word.
my God.
And so naturally, I smashed that like button.
yeah.
No, you didn't smash it. You hearted it.
I went through every emotion. It was in a Facebook emotional roller coaster. I hit every reaction possible before I landed back on the like.
I love
And
when
then I unliked it, and then I liked it some more.
I love when like randomly the older generation accidentally puts the angry face on like a service or like a post, and you're like, "Why were you angry, Nancy?" And she's like, "I meant to like it."
I always take it as real. I'm just like, oh wow, okay, well, didn't like the sermon that day. That's fine.
Yeah.
Won't visit you now.
Can y'all think of anything other than like it's just the way we've always done it? Like that's a lot of issues that I can see churches running into. Can you think of like any other kind of obstacles in terms of like maybe it's part of culture now, maybe it's like honoring privacy? I was just talking today to someone we used to do ministry door to door. You know, you knock on someone else's door, visitation. Maybe you might maybe you still do it.
Yeah.
Some places still do
Traditions.
it. Yeah. But like, can you think of anything that's, you know, when you consider the interest of others, what else can get in the way other than maybe the way we've always done it?
It's just, I think it probably boils down to a lot of like just preference. I mean, when you're talking about a church, it doesn't matter if it's 8 people, 80 people, 800 people, or wherever, however many people you have, how many people are in that local church, that's how many opinions you have, perspectives. And then within that, you've got layers of those who are vocal about their perspectives, those that others listen to and will follow. And so it's so much to it. But I think it comes down to that's a big one that you hear a lot. Well, we've always done it such a way, or similarly and tied off to it. It's like, well, when Pastor so and so was here back in '84, and we were running 250 people and running buses. Well, that was the culture then. Especially in the independent Baptist world. I mean, if they were a successful church, they were running buses, bus routes, picking up kids.
Yeah.
It didn't matter about paperwork. They didn't have to worry about the things we have to worry about today. And culture is constantly changing. And the hard part is we want to hold on to our certain cultures in the church, whether it's healthy or not. And so you run into a big issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's go. I actually got to run here in a few minutes. That was a good ending, I think.
Where
Joe,
you
it was
going?
good to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. As always, I've really enjoyed every episode so far. Glued to my seat.
On Pandora.
Yeah, listen to Pandora. Here's how you can tell if someone uses Spotify or
That should have
Pandora.
been the opener.
Get there. Hey, which do you listen to Spotify or
I've been listening to
Pandora? And I
that
can tell you what Bible
ninth
translation
grade.
you listen to. Hey, you know what? If you listen to Pandora, you're probably a King Jameser, right? If you are,
I didn't know they still existed.
first of all, Pandora
Joe's
is still
got a
fabulous. It's pretty much-
Monthly
What?
subscription.
Like I got the app right now. I'll pull it up and bust out.
They'll
some congrats
put
to-
Android as an advertisement over that stuff.
Kidding me? Look, our church actually because of me.
Is that where your sermons are posted?
It is. That's one of these. we're reaching as equally as many as this podcast. One, it's there. It's not good sermons either.
Live stream to Facebook.
Look, Pandora. I mean, we do live stream to Facebook. Yeah, technically right now we are still. It's a whole other story. You have to ask my wife, but yeah, it's a mess. I hate honestly, and this is probably a different podcast. I tell the people all the time, if we could literally, and we woke up one day, the projector's gone, speakers are gone, Facebook is gone, website's gone, that's fine. Like I'm
We'll
still
be
gonna have
okay.
church. I don't care.
Yeah,
Matter
we'll be
of fact, I would prefer to go back to it. Some of my favorite services that we've ever had were when pianist was out unexpectedly, the power went out, like stuff didn't work right, like we had to use hymns, whatever, like actual hymn books, or just go print off copies of In Christ Alone because the people have been singing it for years and still don't have it memorized. Who doesn't do that? I mean,
We're singing that this Sunday.
are you? Our new hymn.
That's our hymn.
We've got a new hymn that we're doing. That we're singing it for the second time this Sunday. All I Have Is Christ.
Oh, yeah, we love that.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
We'll see if they like it. If they don't, I don't care. It's one of my favorites. You're going to sing it.
We're also singing my favorite hymn. Do you consider this a hymn?
Row, row, boat.
Close. Come Christians join to sing.
Yeah, that's a good one. Consider it him. What do you say, music man?
Is
I
that a
don't think I
hymn?
know that one.
Oh wow.
Must be a hymn.
Gets paid to do it. Yeah,
Must
be
be
a hymn.
a hymn.
Guess they don't have that one in the NLT over there. What are we reading?
Am I still recording? Are you going to give like an actual ending?
No, that's good. Let's wrap it up there. We're definitely going to have you on again, Joe, because that would be cool to talk about some of the stuff, how we, and the things that we utilize that it would probably be just as well that we didn't have to.
It is well.
We're seeing that.
Episode 6 of the Not Good Podcast with Joe Bryant.
Hey, thanks so much.
Hey, man.
Enjoyed
We've
my
been-
time.
We've
And,
been not good.
Looking forward to coming back anytime. I can say it was not good.
Thank you for listening to the Not Good Podcast. Contact your host, David Jane, at davidj@skyhighmediallc.com.